Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of EPiServer Developer Weekly. For this week, trying something a little bit different. I know there are a lot of questions hanging about around Ectron and EPiServer, and we've got a lot of people making transitions and discovering more about EPiServer as a platform. So a lot of questions. We went out to some of our developers we know are making that transition and asked them to send in some questions. And I brought on board Alan and Christopher, who are EPiServer experts. And I'm going to label them as such, whether they want it or not. At this point, I'm definitely not. So they're going to be better equipped to answer these questions than I am. If anybody has any questions as we're doing the show, feel free to reach out over Twitter using the hashtag EPIDEV. That's EPIDEV. And with that, Alan, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Sure, thanks. Let me see. So I am basically I work with EPiServer. I've worked with EPiServer for quite a lot of years, and I do a lot of different stuff in the product management team. So yeah, looking forward to answer some questions. I've been hosting a few of these episodes myself, so if you're a regular viewer, you must know me by now.
Yep, Alan was hosting a show just last week on the forgotten persona, the editor. Yep. And Christopher?
Hi, my name is Christopher Sjöberg. I work with product experts as a product expert in the Stockholm team. And I work close with the developers, and I also do some expert services gigs, that is troubleshooting hardcore, how would you say, issues in a production environment or development.
Great. So let's just dive right in. Again, if you have any questions, just reach out via Twitter using the hashtag EPIDEV, which is in my lower third if you forget what that is. So first question is very generally, how do I deploy anything other than IIS Express? So what are typical deployment models?
Well, there are many different ways to deploy and to work with the system. I would say that I personally like to use just MS deploy packages that you can create straight from Visual Studio, or use the general publish functionality. If you're working with Azure, for instance, just use publish from Visual Studio and publish straight into Azure or to IIS to any other site. Sometimes, if you want to do a manual deploy, you can do that. Of course, it's basically Xcopy deployment plus a database that you often have to worry about, and then adjusting the right configuration files afterwards. I know you can set up a lot of different approaches to automated deployments, so Christopher, maybe you have some insight on that.
One of our favorite tools is to use Octopus Deploy. Octopus Deploy will essentially take a package that comes out of your build server and install that on your development server or your staging servers or the production servers. And we actually have Octopus deployments going to all these different environments and do all the automatic things to do some config tweaking or to store backup copies of the old code. So it is really convenient also, as well with the Octopus deploy into a CI type development.
Great. So second question, how do I set up additional sites or multi-site?
Well, that's something you can easily do just by browsing into admin mode of EPiServer. I should actually just show it because it is so easy that it feels stupid not to just jump in and show it. I believe I can do it here. Hang on a second. I hope my screen is the one that's showing right now. So basically, when you manage your websites, you can basically go into your website system. You can just add a site, and there you can set up the site. But you can add many sites, and you set up which start page you want to use. So for multi-site in an EPiServer, you typically have one code base. Of course, you can divide it into separate libraries and so on, but one code base, and then multiple starting points in your tree structure. And it's just about adding them within the admin mode. Yep.
Great. And moving right along. So we actually have two very related questions that came from different sources. So we'll start with the more general question, can my blocks have icons so that I can tell them apart in the editor pane?
Absolutely. I mean, you can have icons in several different places. One approach is when you create a new piece of content, you can have icons for the different content types there. But the individual content can also have icons. There's a couple of projects online, and we can, I guess, send out the link on Twitter to one of the projects with some code samples on how you achieve that in your code and set up specific content type icons.
All right, and then the related question is, can I have EPiServer generate a thumbnail when I upload a PDF?
Yes, as a matter of fact, you can do that and many other things. I looked around and I saw, for example, when it comes to media items, such PDF is a media item.
Did we lose Christopher there?
It sounds like we lost Christopher. Yeah. looks like he froze up.
Let's give him a second to get back and jump on to the next question. Christopher, are you back now?
Yes, I'm back. Apparently, I was in radio shadow. Okay, so with EPiServer, you have page data, you have media data. They are all based on the same type of structure. For PDFs and images and videos and other stuff, they're all derived. Their models all derive from media data. And when you upload media data, you can quite easily integrate that with a thumbnail creating. Share a little piece of that, if that's all right.
Sure.
And that would be right over, let's see, here. So here is a related project displaying file size for your media data. So what they do here is that they upload and they would like to render the size of the PDF alongside with the actual link to it. So what they do here is that they create a generic media here that has a file size, and then just simply get the file size from the binary stream that stores the information. And here they have created an event. So each time you save or create content, they hook on to these event handlers, and they would retrieve the size of the stream and add that to the content, and that will be done automatically. Essentially, you would do the same way, but you would mark the media with having a marker like this. So it will be. I don't know if you can see that. Yes. So you have the extension string set to PDF, and then it would use this class to represent a PDF, and then this class would then contain an image, for example, that would be the thumbnail of your item.
Great. So we have a question that is not very specific. It's how would I add a modal window? Add to the layout page or a view?
Yeah, so again, it's kind of hard to know exactly what's meant here. Is that meant as a modal dialog added to a page on the website that the visitors can view? Because in that case, I would just add it using whatever JavaScript framework you prefer and set it up on your client, use content from the system to load it up. If you're talking about something in edit mode, then I would refer back to last week's episode where we talked a bit more about how can you enhance stuff for the editor with editor descriptors and UI enhance and so on.
Right. So next question is referring to EPiServer's admin mode, which is where you would do scheduled jobs. Alan, as you were showing, add a new site. Will there be changes when the merge product releases to that administrative mode?
So I mean, again, when we're talking about admin mode here, we're talking about the admin mode. In the EPiServer backend of EPiServer is really an edit mode and it's an admin mode and a few other modes, by the way. right now, admin mode, I will admit, is lagging a bit behind in the usability compared to edit mode, for instance. It is some of it remnants from before, and to my knowledge, we're not planning any major improvements of it right now, but I think it's definitely coming, but I don't know exactly when. Probably not for the first release of the Converge platform. I mean, it does its job, and it's a mode where you typically don't have to do a lot of work. The majority of the work is done in edit mode, and that's what we keep focusing on.
Yeah, that's what I like about it. Is it really is an admin area. It's really not intended for your day-to-day authors.
Exactly.
Who should really never have to go into that area.
Yeah, it's a one-time thing, right? When you define your websites or set up the languages in your website and so on, it's not something you should go in and work in day to day.
Yeah. So next question is about licensing. Mentions an Azure article mentions a special type of license, and the License Center says it's only in beta. Do we have any insight there?
Well, it's actually a bit unclear. The code for the license is production quality. I'm not really sure if we have actually officially pushed it out as for the business system as released. That's something we can look into. The question I believe also mentions a bit about, can you run just a SQL Azure database on a regular website? And of course you can do that.
Yeah, they say they would at least like to store the database in an Azure database.
Of course you can do that, and you can install it inside running on Azure websites. The clever thing about this license is that it's a callback license, so it'll check back with the central EPiServer server to ensure that you have the rights to run that specific instance on Azure, as opposed to the regular license files that are tied up to a MAC address or an IP address of a machine, which you cannot be certain of when you're running on Azure websites.
Right. So we talked about this a little bit before we started the show. Is there an equivalent of Ectron's collections and menus, those types of architectures? The questioner and I had talked a little bit about a collection block and different footer navs and things like that. So what would be the options? And we probably do a whole show around this, but what would be the quickfire options there?
Again, James, I would say that's really a question that is that's much bigger than just today. How do you structure your website? What do you divide into pages? What do you divide into blocks? We touched a bit upon it last week as well, and I think it's probably something we should set up a full session about. I think one thing that's a key differentiator, the difference between EPiServer and Ectron, is the fact that EPiServer is very based on the page hierarchy as one key structure. Typically, this is the structure that you'd like to see in your hierarchy with your pages and your content here, being the same structure as you have in your URLs on the site, being the same structure that you have in your menus on the site. Now, of course, there can be differences to that, but as a rule of thumb, that's a good approach here. Now, you can, of course, work around it. We have a property type called a link collection, where you can have collections of links to other pages on the site, and you can use that as a foundation for menus. So you could add a settings area on the start page, for instance, with a link collection to a given submenu. You could also just build up a menu structure as pages here on the site, in which case you could, for instance, use, this is a bit more old-fashioned, but you could actually dive into settings and set up pages in a hierarchical structure with shortcuts to other pages. So you build up the right structure with the URL and the menus, but actually they work in a different way, pointing to other content. So it's a bit more complex than a simple answer.
Yep. So let's plan to do something bigger around site navigation and data structures inside of EPiServer.
Absolutely.
The next question, I think, Christopher, is going to be more geared to you. I need to set open graph header tags based on page content. Can I view set headers in the root CSHTML file?
Yes, you can. Well, but truth be told, this question is slightly outside of the EPiServer domain because it touches more on the concept of MVC. But with MVC, you can set up a section in your layout, and you would then render different elements to that section from your page. So that's typically how you would layer your code, so that you don't have to be aware of the page information from the layout, but you would be injecting stuff into the layout from the page. That's typically how you would want to layer your application.
If I can just add on top of that, if you look at the Alloy sample side for MVC, there's some good examples of how you can not open graph tags, but how you can both within the layout and within header sections and so on, can easily use the model and add content there.
Okay. We again have two related questions. So what EPiServer features will get supplanted by Ectron features in the merged product? And then the related question to that is, how does one build forms that capture data? These would be like a contact us form, and write that data to the database.
Yeah, I'll try to answer that. So there are a number of features, and I'm not sure I remember all of them correctly, that we are gaining when we're converging the platforms, obviously. For all of them, I think it's safe to say that we are not just copying and pasting code. We are re-implementing and getting inspired from the Ectron approach and the way the problems that Ectron was solving, and then trying to implement them in a way so it solves it the way you would do it in the EPiServer setting. Of course, otherwise it wouldn't make all that much sense. In some cases, though, there are some reuse. One example is Ectron had a number of connectors using the Digital Experience Hub to various systems, and some of those connectors we are moving to EPiServer, so we have the same amount of connectors to the same systems. On top of that, we're looking at other features. For instance, we talked about it last episode as well. Instant templates, a way where you can instantiate pages not based on a type, but on a previous saved template of that page or other content item. We're also working towards, this is longer and a bigger project, some new forms that we hope to have out in time for the converged release, at least in the beta in the fall.
So maybe when that comes out in beta for the forms, maybe we do an episode on forms.
Absolutely.
When that beta comes out.
Hopefully even before the beta, so we can show people what's coming. That would be a good idea.
Yeah.
But the forms is really an exciting new feature where we add a lot of functionality that's been wished for throughout the years from EPiServer editors, and of course we're getting inspired by the capabilities in Ectron as well when building the new forms, and of course also looking at a bunch of other forms in the market. So editorial forms is something that's going to be really great fairly soon.
Great. So web API access for Ajax calls. Can we speak to that?
Absolutely. There is, Christoph, you can probably come up with more details here, but there is built-in REST API for the Ajax calls we do in our user interface in edit mode, for instance. And it's possible to extend on that, but it's not really fully documented, and it's not supposed to be extended at this moment, as far as I know. We have another project that's a fairly new project that's available in the NuGet feed for EPiServer called the Service API, which is a project that you can just add to your solution, and that gives you a full REST OAuth2 API. However, right now in the current version, the functionality is mostly focused around commerce. The CMS functionality is still fairly limited, but what's really cool about it is that it's based on Web API, and you can extend it. So if you want to build any kind of service that you need for an Ajax call or so on, you can build it very easily using Web API, extend it on top of this, and just get all the OAuth and rule settings and permissions for free. I've tried it. It's not really that hard. And I expect us to come out with various projects based on the Service API, and hopefully also more advanced versions of it in the future.
Right. So I do have a question via Twitter that I don't think you guys will be able to answer, and to be frank, I don't have an answer either. How do you unit test Ectron Framework API calls? I've seen lots of questions, but no solutions. I don't have a ready answer for you, Jason, on that. But if you have posted to the forums, if you've posted that question, then send me the link. If you've not, then please do and send me the link. Just tweet the link to me with the EpiDev hashtag, and I'll see if I can get somebody to respond to that out of our engineering team. Okay, so we had a series of questions around infrastructure and deployments and environments synchronization. I think that we will probably skip those for now and come back and do an infrastructure episode with graphs and diagrams and such, so we can give that the full justice that it deserves. Unless there's something that Alan or Christopher that you want to say about that right now. The questions are: how does deployment from test to staging to production work in Epi? How are environments kept in sync? And what are typical infrastructures?
Perhaps Christopher, you have some insight there.
Yeah, I would focus around the deployment of the code, because the content is always sensitive to bring from a production environment back into test for a number of reasons, and for different clients have different requirements with that. But it essentially goes in two different paths. You would do a code deployment with Octopus Deploy or MS Deploy or any other tool of your choice. And that would, for most cases, solve or do the updates that you want to do. In the other cases where you actually want to move content as well, you would create an export package and then import that package into the destination. That mostly works fine, but in some cases, depending on how you have created your applications, because sometimes you would deploy files side by side, like not a part of the actual solution, but some people want to upload CSS or JavaScripts as static files onto the website, and that is not included in. But typically, yes, you would do a code deployment as one path, and the other with content you would use export and import.
Okay, and I do think that there are a number of things in the EPiServer roadmap centered around synchronization of data between environments, but there's not anything detailed that we can go into at this time.
It's an area we constantly work to improve, of course. So, but I think it deserves a more in-depth session and some graphs we can show and talk through different scenarios and configurations as well.
Yeah.
Which, also, when looking at typical infrastructure configurations, could be really interesting to get some of our hosting specialists on the show, I guess.
Yeah. So the next question is source control. Which files are typically kept in source control and which are omitted? So this was a common practice inside of the Ectron development world, that you would only put your own code because Ectron had an installer that would deploy a min site. It'd be like starting with a EPiServer empty site and saying, I'm only going to put my own code into source control and not the EPiServer empty site code. So in EPiServer, what's the best practice around source control?
That was an interesting question. I would recommend you to check in the packages.config, which is the route for installing the NuGet packages. So when you then reopen your Visual Studio, you would get a package restore. But that happens only the first time when you open the package on or download the source code on a new computer and open it in Visual Studio. When it comes to all the remaining files, I would avoid all the obvious ones, such as user settings, like the SUO file for Visual Studio, and any files that have been customized for the current user. That includes maybe a license.config. Maybe if EPiServer framework.config or web.config has to be changed when it comes to paths, I would not check those files in, but I would make them to be generated from a template file, so that you can use the same process, whether it's a developer machine or a test environment or the production environment. Essentially, all the same stuff should go anywhere else, so that you don't risk deploying a developer's license file or a developer's web config settings. All of those changes should be done on a file that's not being maintained by source control. When it comes to anything else, essentially everything that is referenced by your CS project files needs to be checked in. And those items are the ones that you see in the Solution Explorer in Visual Studio, with the exception of these configuration files that have been changed for the current user.
Okay. And what's the best way to handle script bundling for each page? So this is, I think, more of an MVC question.
It is, I guess. I would just, I mean, there are several approaches, but I think it's a good idea to just, for questions like that, look at the reference side, for instance, the Alloy side that you get with when you set up the product. There's some really good examples in there where you can see how it actually does script and CSS bundling.
So Kenny wants to know what is Christopher's Twitter handle. So you're on the hook for being more active on Twitter now. Just letting you know.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose him again?
Yeah,
Okay.
But I didn't hear the question.
Kenny on Twitter wants to know what your Twitter handle is.
KRSJO.
Right, so the first 2 letters of your first name and then the first 3 letters of your last name.
Without the umlaut, but yes.
Yeah. Okay, so and I said you're on the hook for being more active on Twitter now.
Yes. Let's maybe now it's it should pop up like that, maybe. Yes.
So the next question is, admittedly by the author, might be more of a philosophical question. Any problems or best practices for transitioning from typical web forms page lifecycle events to Ajax calls with controllers?
It's all it's a very interesting question too, because page lifecycle events is for me at least is associated with the web forms, and when you do Ajax calls with controllers, that's a typical like some people call it Web 2.0, where you essentially get the skeleton, the frame of the page, and then fill it in with information as you go. I think that obvious things such as getting the base frame out of the page out as quickly as possible is crucial for succeeding with any such things, because if you cannot get the base HTML, you will essentially delay all of the loading of the contents of the page, which is the interesting part. And I would also make sure or think about getting the root, like the frame of the page, being output cached, so that it's extremely quick in loading the skeleton. The processing time for the server should be like a millisecond or so to get the skeleton out, and then all of the customizations should be done in these Ajax calls to the controllers, and hopefully many of those can also be output cached, so that very few elements of the page needs to be done, through the slow path of the server.
Right. So something that I would say there is look at the philosophy around progressive enhancement. If you're concerned around about accessibility of your content, for example, then you may not want to just load the framework and then use Ajax to populate the content within the framework, depending on your application, what you're building, what your primary concerns are. But I think progressive enhancement would encourage people to make sure that the content is being loaded along with the base framework, and then load in the ancillary pieces via Ajax in that combined philosophy.
Yeah, I've seen a number of cases where developers have been creating a site that the skeleton of the page is essentially all of the content of the page, but maybe the shopping cart or like the profile information or the logged in user would then be populated through an Ajax call.
Right, but as you said, the content is the interesting part of the page. That's why most people are there. And then what's the best practice on migrating controls? These would be web forms user controls. And he has and widgets, which are basically web forms user controls inside of the world of Vectron. So how would you migrate ASCX web forms user controls into EPiServer MVC?
I don't think there's one really good approach. You can just say this is the way to do it because it depends on the individual project. I would probably wait until I do a website revamp and then re-implement them, so I have something that might even be better than what I had before. Of course, you can reuse some elements of them and copy and paste some code. If they're structured in a nice way with a business end to them and not all just jumbled code behind, then you should have a good chance of reusing quite a bit of it.
Yeah. Okay, and that's all. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Also be mentioned that EPiServer runs quite nicely with MVC and web forms side by side. So if you want to, take a step into MVC, you can actually start doing that without making an entire revamp of the entire site. Even though you might want to, you don't actually have to.
Good to know. Okay, and that's all the time we have. I know Alan has another commitment, so we need to let him go. Thank you, Alan and Christopher, for joining today. A lot of questions. We managed to get through all of them. If anybody has additional questions, reach out via Twitter using hashtag EpiDev, or feel free to send me an email to james.stout@episerver.com. Again, thanks, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, James. See you next time.
Thank you.